part was how careful I got without meaning to. I was out behind the cabin just after sunrise, one knee in the snow, changing lenses with my gloves off because I didn't trust myself to do it by feel, and I caught myself looking over my shoulder like I'd heard something. I hadn't, that was the thing. It was dead quiet. No engine noise from the pass, no wind in the branches, not even that soft powdery slide you get when snow drops off a limb somewhere out in the trees. Just my own breathing and the tiny plastic click of the lens cap in my pocket. I remember thinking the woods didn't feel empty anymore. Not occupied exactly, just aware. I stood up and looked across the tree line behind the cabin. Those dark pines with the snow packed into the lower branches. And there was nothing there I could point to. Nothing moving, nothing out of place. But I still put the long lens back on a little too fast and dropped the rear cap in the snow. That was the first moment I can honestly say something in my head shifted, even though at the time I still would told you it was nothing. I do this every December. That's been my thing for a few years now. I rent a cabin somewhere cold and quiet, usually somewhere farther out than most people want to be in winter, and I spend a week taking pictures until my batteries die and my fingers stop working. I like the way snow simplifies everything. You get these clean lines, muted color, and tracks where there weren't tracks before. It makes the world look edited on purpose. I live alone, so being alone somewhere remote never bothered me. Honestly, I like it. No schedule. No one asking when I'll be back. No pressure to make a trip into some group experience. Just me, too much coffee, a camera backpack that weighs more than it should, and a rental cabin with a wood stove or a place and enough bad lighting to make editing photos at night feel cozy instead of depressing. That Montana trip was supposed to be one of the better ones. The cabin was near Lost Trail Pass, out in the Bitterroot Mountains, tucked off a snow-covered logging road that looked like it hadn't seen a plow in days. It was exactly what I wanted. Small place, one bedroom, one main room with big windows facing the trees and no visible neighbors. You could stand on the porch and turn in a full circle and see nothing but woods, slope, and snow. The host had warned me to bring supplies because once the weather moved in, getting back out could get annoying fast. So I did. I brought enough food for the whole week. Extra camera batteries, hand warmers, a cheap grocery store box of fire starters, and my old green thermos with the dent in the side from when I dropped it on basalt in Oregon the year before. The first 3 nights were perfect. I had a routine by then. Up before light. Drive or hike somewhere nearby for sunrise if the road looks safe, and work the area around the cabin. Come back late morning with my face stinging and my beard carrying little bits of frost in it. Eat something simple. Edit pictures by the fireplace in the afternoon while my socks dried on the hearth. Go back out for sunset if the sky looks like it might do something interesting. Then Anne Arlie Denearly Emery card backups. Maybe read half a chapter of whatever paperback I threw in my bag and sleep. The cabin made it easy to settle in. It had that familiar rental smell of old pine, laundry detergent, and a faint trace of propane. Not bad, just lived in by strangers. The floor creaked in the same 2 places every time. The kitchen drawer with the forks, stuck unless you lifted and pulled. There was one lamp by the couch that flickered for a second before staying on. I notice stuff like that fast in any place I stay. I like knowing how a space behaves. By the 4th morning, I knew that cabin pretty well. I also knew the snow around it had been untouched when I got there. That's why the footprints stood out immediately. I found them behind the cabin while walking out to photograph the trees after fresh snow overnight. It was one single line of prints cutting across the open area beyond the back steps, then disappearing into the woods on the other side. Not close enough to make me stop breathing or anything dramatic like that. Just close enough that you noticed. Human boot prints. Crisp edges. Not old. My first thought was hunter. My second thought was snowmobiler. Maybe someone moving through before dawn and cutting across on foot for some reason. It wasn't that strange. Remote cabins aren't bubbles. People move through land like that all the time, especially if they're local and know the area better than you do. I remember actually feeling a little embarrassed at how fast I'd reacted to them. Like, congratulations. You rented a cabin in western Montana and discovered other human beings exist. So I photographed the tracks because, of course, I did, then went on with my morning. That day stayed normal enough that I barely thought about it. I drove down one of the logging roads until the snow got too deep for the rental, then hiked maybe half a mile to get a shot of the ridge catching the afternoon light. I came back cold, made soup out of a can that tasted mostly like salt, and spent the evening editing a set of trees reflected in a frozen pond. I remember one of the images was actually pretty good. Blue shadows, orange sky, a deer trail crossing the lower frame. The kind of quiet winter shot that only works if nothing happens in it. The next morning, there were more prints. These were different. They came out of the trees behind the cabin and stopped right at the edge of the tree line, maybe 30 yards back, where the open snow began. They didn't cross the clearing this time. They just stopped there, facing the cabin, then turned and went back the same way. I stood there with my gloves half on, staring at them, and tried to force a reasonable explanation into place. Maybe whoever it was had seen the cabin late and thought it was empty, then noticed my car. Maybe they were just checking where the property line started. Maybe they needed help and changed their mind. All of those made more sense than the other interpretation, which was that somebody had walked up through the trees, stood there looking at the cabin for a while, then left. I didn't like how fast my brain went to that one, so I did what I always do when something doesn't make sense. I started treating it like information instead of feeling. I checked the tread pattern. Standard winter boot, nothing unusual, no obvious limp, no dog tracks with them. The stride looked steady. The snow depth around the prints suggested an adult. But that's not an exact science, and I knew that. I looked for signs they branched off anywhere else nearby. Nothing. Then I laughed at myself a little out loud, just to break the mood. I remember saying, "You're literally analyzing footprints before breakfast." That helped for maybe 10 minutes. After that, I started noticing how often I looked up from whatever I was doing toward the back windows. Not because I saw anything, because I kept expecting to. That afternoon, I was outside with the tripod set up, trying to catch light filtering through a stand of pines farther upslope, and I noticed something through the telephoto lens. Just a dark vertical interruption between the trees way back there. Nearly 300 yards, maybe a little less. Too far to resolve clearly with the heat shimmer off bright snow and the branches cutting the frame. I lowered the camera and looked with my own eyes. Nothing. I brought the lens back up and there it was again, or I thought it was. A shape that could have been a trunk, a shadow, a person in dark outerwear standing still. The longer I looked, the less sure I got. That's the problem with long lenses in winter woods. Everything starts turning into suggestion. I shifted position, tried a few shots, zoomed tighter, and by then whatever I thought I'd seen was gone or hidden by branches or maybe had never been there. I told myself exactly that. You want to know what makes you stupid in situations like this? It isn't panic, it's pride. I didn't want to be the guy who rents a beautiful cabin and spends the whole trip spooking himself because he saw one odd thing in the woods. I take solo trips all the time. I've camped alone in worse weather than that. I've been miles farther from a road than I was there. Being alone was never the issue. So every time the thought came back, I countered it. It's private land around private land. People move through. You're using a long lens on branches and shadows. You've been by yourself for days and your brain wants company, even if it's the wrong kind. That nig hate. I made pasta on the little stove, burned the garlic because the pan heated unevenly, and sat on the couch with my laptop, trying to work through the shots from the day. But I kept catching reflections in the black window over the sink and thinking somebody was moving. Out there, it was always me. The next morning, it snowed hard. Big, thick flakes that started before dawn and kept going through most of the day. The kind that erases edges. Good for atmosphere, bad for driving, bad for detail shots unless you're willing to baby your gear. I stayed close to the cabin and spent most of the afternoon inside, editing older files and feeding the fire. By evening, there was enough fresh snow down that the world outside looked reset, clean again. That helped more than I want to admit, because fresh snow means evidence. Fresh snow means if someone walked around that cabin, I'd know. I slept better that night. Not great, but better. I remember waking once to the furnace kicking on, then once more because a branch scraped lightly across the side of the cabin. Both times I listened for a minute, heard nothing else, and went back to sleep. In the morning, I opened the bedroom curtain, and there was a footprint directly beneath the window. Just one. I froze there with the curtain pinched between my fingers. Heavy snowfall all day before, then clear overnight. No wind is strong enough to distort edges. The print was fresh. A single boot print deep in the snow below the bedroom window. Close enough that if someone had leaned slightly, they could have looked right in. I stared at it for a long time, trying to come up with anything that made sense. Maybe I had somehow missed it the day before. No, impossible. Maybe it was mine from earlier. Wrong thread. Maybe something fell from the roof and distorted the snow in a way that looked like a print. No, it was a print. What bothered me more than the print itself was that there was no obvious approach and no obvious exit at first glance from the window. Just the one mark, like whoever made it had stepped there and then been lifted away. When I went outside to check, I found the rest, faint at first where drifting had softened them, then clearer out past the wall of the cabin. Somebody had come along the side, stopped under the window, then continued around back toward the trees. I wish I could tell you I left right then. I thought about it. I really did. I even started doing that practical math in my head. How long does it take to pack the camera gear safely? How bad the road might be if I tried to leave before the sun softened the ice? Whether I was overreacting to something that still, technically, had no direct threat attached to it, no attempted entry, no note, no vehicle, no face, just tracks. And there was another part of me that hated giving up the last 2 nights. That sounds stupid now, but if you've planned a trip around weather and location and light, you know how easy it is to bargain with yourself. I told myself I'd stay one more day. Final evening, final sunrise, then leave early the next morning if anything else felt off. Even then, I changed my behavior. I stopped moving room to room with the lights on after dark. I started parking the rental so it wasn't visible from the back windows. I checked the door lock twice every night, then once more from bed when I knew I was being ridiculous. I kept my camera by the window in case I saw movement again. That whole day had this thin, stretched feeling to it, like every normal task was being done underneath another thought. I went out before sunset because the sky had cleared and the mountains to the west were taking on that cold pink color you get right before the light drops out. Beautiful evening, honestly. Sharp air, snow squeaking under my boots, the kind of light I'd come here for in the first place. I set up behind the cabin, pointing toward the tree line more than the landscape, if I'm being honest. I told myself I was shooting contrast and texture, the dark pines against the open snow. What I was really doing was checking. Through the lens, the woods compressed into layers, black trunks, white breaks, branches like lines of static. I moved slowly from left to right, pausing whenever something looked too dark or too straight. Then I saw it. A person, no question this time, standing motionless among the pines, partly screened by branches, maybe 250 or 300 yards back. Dark jacket, dark pants, no visible skin, body turned toward the cabin. Too still to mistake for a tree once you'd seen the shoulders. I took 3 shots in quick succession, hands suddenly clumsy on the camera controls, then lowered the lens just enough to look directly. Nothing I could pick out. Back to the lens. Still there. I took more pictures, zoomed tighter. The autofocus hunted once, twice, then caught on a hard edge. The figure hadn't moved. And then I noticed the small bright points where the face should been. Not eyes, glass. 2 pale circles catching the last of the light. Binoculars. Pointed straight at me, straight to the cabin. It hit me all at once, physically, before I had a clean thought about it. My mouth went dry. My fingers felt thick and slow. I backed up so fast I kicked one leg of the tripod and almost dumped the whole setup in the snow. I grabbed the camera, left the tripod half collapsed, and went inside without taking my eyes off that part of the trees until the door shut. The cabin suddenly felt wrong in a way it hadn't before. Too many windows, too much open space around it, too far from anyone who would hear anything. I locked the door even though it had already been locked, then went to the front window, then the side one, then back to the table where I'd dropped the camera. I loaded the images onto my laptop with shaking hands and zoomed in. There was no mistaking it on the screen. Person in the trees, face hidden, holding binoculars up to their eyes, watching the cabin, watching me. I don't remember deciding to pack. I was just suddenly doing it. Batteries in the case, lenses wrapped and stowed, laptop in sleeve. The toothbrush is still damp, going into the side pocket. I left food in the fridge, left the firewood stack by the hearth, and left the tripod strap twisted around itself because I couldn't get it straight with my hands acting the way they were acting. Every few seconds, I'd stop and listen because I kept thinking I was going to hear boots on the porch or a knock or something at the back wall. Nothing. That almost made it worse. I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark for a while with the laptop closed, coat on, keys in my pocket, listening to the cabin settle and the heater cycle on and off. Every little sound had shape to it. The fridge compressor. Snow is slipping from the roof. A branch tapping somewhere outside and then not tapping again. A little before dawn, while the sky was still that flat gray that doesn't feel like morning yet, I loaded the car. I kept expecting to see movement at the edge of the trees. I didn't. The road out was icy enough that the rental fishtailed twice before I got to the main route. And there was one stretch where I seriously thought I might slide into the ditch. and have to spend another night up there whether I wanted to or not. But I made it down. I made it to somewhere with gas pumps and fluorescent lights and a clerk behind a counter who looked half asleep and entirely ordinary, and I realized only then how hard my jaw had been clenched. Later that day, I called the county sheriff's office because I didn't know what else to do with it. I told them where the cabin was, told them about the tracks, and then told them I had photos. The deputy I spoke to was polite in that careful way that suggested he was deciding how much of a city idiot he thought I was, but he did call me back. He said they checked what they could, and as far as they could confirm, there were no hunters registered in that immediate area that week. He didn't say much beyond that. Just to call again if I notice anything else, and to send over the photos. I did send them. I never heard anything back after that. I also never went back for the last 2 nights of the reservation, never asked for a refund, never rebooked that place, even though the pictures from the first few days were some of the best winter shots I've ever taken. They sat on my hard drive for months before I touched them. I still have the zoomed-in image from that last evening in a folder I rarely open. If you didn't know what you were looking at, it would just seem like another dark figure between trees. But I know what it is, or at least I know what it was doing. What I don't know, and what still bothers me more than it should, is who stood out there for multiple days with binoculars pointed at a cabin that was obviously occupied in an area where the sheriff said nobody was supposed to be hunting at all. Sometimes I think about that single print under my bedroom window, and the part that never sits its right is how long they had to be out there before I finally saw them looking back. The next one comes from a very different kind of place, and a very different reason for being there. I found the envelope while I was shoveling the porch, and for a second I thought it was one of those old seed packets my dad used to leave everywhere, because the paper had gone a little soft at the corners from the damp pee, and it was wedged right under the door where the wind couldn't take it. I remember standing there with the shovel in one hand, breathing through that cheap black knit scarf my wife hates because it smells like wood smoke, all winter looking at my own name written across the front. Not typed, written. Just my first name. The snow was coming down lightly, enough that the trees around the cabin had that muffled look, and I had this immediate stupid feeling that I should put it back where I found it and pretend I never saw it. Which doesn't make sense, I know. It was an envelope, that's all. But I was alone, 7 miles from the nearest occupied place, and the handwriting wasn't one I recognized. I slid it into my jacket pocket and finished clearing the porch first. That tells you a lot about the kind of person I am, I think. Not brave, just stubborn about doing things in the order I decided to do them. That cabin had been in my family for close to 40 years. My dad bought the land with his brother back when you could still do things like that without emptying your life savings, and the two of them built most of the place themselves. Not beautifully, functionally. It's out in northern Minnesota, deep enough in the Superior National Forest that the last stretch is basically a Forest Service road, and then an even worse road, pretending to be private access. In the fall, it was for hunting. In summer, it was for fixing what winter and neglect had done. And in winter, after my dad died, it became one more thing that was suddenly mine. I need to be clear about something. I do not like being alone up there. I never did, not even as a kid. My dad loved it. He liked the silence, the distance, the feeling that once you shut that door at night, the rest of the world had to stay where it was. I always felt the opposite. To me, it was too quiet too far, too easy to imagine trouble showing up from any direction, and there being nobody around to help. But after he was gone, there wasn't really anybody else to do the winter maintenance trip. My uncle was too old for it. My brother lives in Arizona and thinks snow is a personality trait, and if I didn't go up once every cold season to check the pipes, clear the load off the roof if I had to, and make sure animals hadn't chewed through anything important, the cabin would have started coming apart fast. So every winter I went. 1 trip, 2 nights if the weather was decent. Get in, get everything working, drain what needs draining, check for storm damage, and get out. I always packed the same way: tool bag, flashlights, extra batteries, small compressor, pipe insulation, coffee. My dad's old red metal thermos, because the handle on mine broke years ago and for some reason I never replaced it. The cap on his still sticks a little when it's cold. You have to twist it harder than it feels correct. That year was the second winter after he died, which somehow felt worse than the first. The first year, everybody is still helping. The second year, it's just your life now. I got up there late in the morning, dug out the door, got the propane going, checked the kitchen lines, Made sure the small electric heater in the back bedroom still worked if the generator needed help. Everything was ordinary enough that by the time I found the envelope, I was almost relaxed. Almost. Inside was one folded piece of paper. No letter. No explanation. Just coordinates written in the same hand as my name and a date from 3 days earlier. That was it. I stared at it long enough that my breath started dampening the paper. Then I brought it inside, set it on the table under the overhead light, and copied the numbers into the map app on my phone while it still had a weak bar of signal near the front window. The location came up less than a mile from the cabin, close enough to walk. My first thought, which I know sounds ridiculous now, was geocaching. Somebody left a note for the wrong person. Or maybe my dad had known someone who still used the place and thought I would understand what this was. Grief does this thing where it makes you reach for explanations that keep a dead person involved in your present life. Like maybe there was some system, some habit, some story I just hadn't been told. So I spent the next hour pretending I was too busy to care about it. I checked the back drain, replaced one cracked piece of weather stripping near the mudroom door, and swept mouse droppings out of a cabinet that never stays sealed as well as you think it should. But the whole time that paper was sitting on the table in the corner of my eye. By mid-afternoon, I had convinced myself that if I didn't go look, I'd spend the whole night thinking about it. The coordinates were in a stand of mixed spruce and birch, not far from an old game trail my dad used to point out, though I hadn't walked it in years. The snow was deep enough that every step felt like work unless I hit a packed section. The air had that metallic cold to it where the inside of your nose starts burning. I carried a folding shovel because I didn't know what I expected to find, and one of my father's old binoculars hanging against my chest because I always brought them even though I barely used them. The woods out there don't have the same dramatic look people imagine, not the way mountains do. It's flatter, denser, quieter. Everything looks close until you try to walk through it. Branches slap your coat. Your boots keep finding hidden holes. Sound travels oddly. You can hear something far away like it's near, then lose something near like it never existed. I checked the coordinates 3 times on the phone before the battery dropped fast from the cold. When I got close, I didn't see anything at first. Just brush half buried in snow, some downed limbs, a low rise under a stand of young spruce. Then I noticed an area where the snow looked slightly different. Not dug up in some obvious cartoon way, just disturbed, packed, then covered again, like someone had tried to smooth it over after the fact. I knelt and started scraping with the folding shovel. About 6 inches in, I hit metal. Not big. A box maybe a little larger than a lunch pail, dark, with a hinged top and mud frozen around one side. It wasn't buried deep, which is another reason I still think about it. Whoever put it there wanted it hidden from casual eyes, not protected from being found. I brushed enough snow away to get my fingers on the edge, and then I heard engines, far off at first. Snowmobiles. I straightened so fast my back popped. Out there, engine noise carries in pieces. You get it between the trees, bouncing strangely, so it took me a second to place the direction. More than one machine, maybe 2, maybe 3. I remember looking down at the box and having this stupid debate with myself in about 3 seconds flat. Open it. No, leave it. Take it. Absolutely not. If somebody put it here and was coming back, you did not want to be the guy standing over it with his hands on it when they arrived. I shoved loose snow back over the top, not nearly as neatly as whoever had done it before, and started back toward the cabin fast without fully running. I kept telling myself, snowmobilers use that forest all the time. It didn't mean anything. It absolutely did not mean they were headed for me. I could hear the engines more clearly after a minute or two, then less clearly, then one of them revved higher, and my whole body tightened in a way I hate admitting. I wasn't thinking heroically. I was thinking about how far I was from the cabin, how annoying it would be to explain to law enforcement why I was wandering around alone, and looking for a buried metal box if this turned into something. By the time I got back, I was sweating under my coat despite the cold. I locked the door and stood at the window with the binoculars, waiting. A while later, I saw them. 2 snowmobiles, maybe 3, moving between the trees farther east of the cabin, and where the terrain opened up. They passed through a gap, then disappeared again. They did not stop. They did not come up the drive. They just kept going. I waited another 20 minutes. Nothing. An hour. Nothing. By early evening, the engine noise was gone completely. That should have been enough for me to decide the whole thing was unrelated. In fact, for a while, it was. I made coffee, ate venison chili from a frozen container my wife had sent with me because she knows I forget to feed myself when I'm up there. I sat at the table with my dad's old county map unfolded and compared it to what was on my phone. The coordinates were real, the box was real, the snowmobiles were real, but none of that proved that those things belonged together. That became my relief. I built it slowly, piece by piece, until it felt solid. Some local kids or hunters leave the envelope as a joke, thinking the cabin is still mostly unused. The box is probably old, maybe part of somebody's stash spot for gear. The snowmobiles pass through because people pass through. If anyone wanted anything from me, they had their chance when I was outside all day. Night settled in normally after that. I checked the stove. I made sure the bathroom pipes were clear. I even called my wife from the one corner near the front window where the signal sometimes cooperates and told her everything was fine, which at that moment I half believed. I didn't mention the envelope because I didn't want to hear the pause she'd do before saying I should come home. For a few hours, I really thought the story was over. That's the part that gets me, because I slept for maybe 40 minutes in the recliner by the heater before I woke up for no clear reason and looked at the clock on the microwave. A little before midnight. The cabin was dark except for the stove glow and the blue light from the microwave and battery charger on the counter. My neck hurt. My mouth tasted like stale coffee. I was just sitting up trying to decide if I wanted to move to the bedroom when I saw light sweep between the trees outside the side window. Not moonlight, headlights. At first, my brain refused it because there is no road on that side of the cabin. Not a vehicle that could be used. Trees too close, ground too uneven, snow too deep. Then the light came again, lower this time, moving behind the trunks. I killed the lamp and went to the window carefully, staying back from the glass because I had that sudden clear understanding that if I could see them, they could probably see in. The binoculars were on the table. I brought them up and focused through the branches. 3 snowmobiles, parked among the pines, maybe a couple of 100 yards out where no trail should been, lights idling low. I could see people moving around them, dark shapes with headlamps, and they weren't just standing there talking, they were searching, sweeping lights over the snow in slow arcs, crossing and recrossing the same section of woods. My section, the exact line I had taken back from the coordinates. One of them bent down and pointed at something in the snow. Another turned on his light and followed the line toward the cabin. I remember whispering, no, not because that helps, just because my brain had finally run out of better words. Everything after that got fast and small. I moved away from the window, killed the microwave light by opening and shutting it, grabbed my keys, the map, my coat, phone, thermos, and nothing else that mattered except the folder with the cabin papers. Because I had this brief irrational fear of leaving anything with my name on it, even though my name had already been on the envelope. I did not turn on any lights. I did not try to call. There was no signal worth trusting. Enz and I knew it. The cabin had a secondary access road out the backside. Road is generous. It was more like an overgrown track my dad used in dry seasons to get around a washout years ago. I had almost gotten stuck on it once in the mud and never loved using it. But in winter, if it was packed enough underneath, sometimes you could creep a truck through and connect with the main forest road farther south. I stood in the mudroom for maybe 2 seconds with my hand on the back door latch, listening. No engines close yet, no voices. Just the stove ticking and my own breathing too loud in the scarf. Then I went. The snow hit my face hard enough to make my eyes water. I kept low along the side of the cabin, expecting any second to hear someone call out. The truck door sounded impossibly loud when I opened it. I did not turn the dome light on. Thank God that old bulb had burned out the year before, and I never replaced it. I got it started on the second try, and that sound felt like announcing myself with a trumpet. Still no shouting. I backed as gently as I could, then more urgently, tires slipping once before catching. When I angled onto the secondary track, branches scraped both sides of the truck at the same time. In the mirror, I could still see the cabin, a dim shape between trees. Then I saw lights moving toward it, not on the drive, through the woods. I don't know how close they got before I lost sight of them because by then I was wrestling the wheel with both hands and trying not to slide into a stand of young pines. There were stretches where the track was barely visible under drifted snow. W and I had to trust memory more than anything in front of me. One bad rut jarred the thermos out of the passenger seat, and it hit the floor hard enough to pop the lid half open. Athene hot coffee smell filled the cab like something from another life. I kept expecting headlights behind me. I never saw them. I made it to the forest road, then to a place where I got enough signal to call. State Patrol routed me locally. Deputies met me at a plowed turnout closer to dawn because that was how long everything took out there. In daylight, they went back with me. They found tracks, snowmobile tracks in the woods, tire marks where I came out, signs that people had been near the cabin. But no people, no machines, nothing at the coordinates except disturbed snow, and when we dug again, no box, gone. That part sounds made up even to me, but it wasn't there. The only thing left from the whole mess was the envelope and the paper with the coordinates, which they took photos of and then kept for a while. Weeks later, I got a call from an investigator who said something that has never helped me as much as I think he believed it would. He told me there had been similar coordinate notes in 2 unrelated incidents in neighboring counties. Different circumstances, same basic idea. An envelope, a location, buried metal boxes that either disappeared or were empty by the time any official got to them. He didn't say criminal ring. He didn't say dead drop. He didn't say prank. He just said they were looking into patterns. I asked what the boxes were for. He said they didn't know. The cabin is still in the family. I still go up there because not going would feel like letting something take the place of us. But I don't stay overnight anymore unless I absolutely have to. And if I do, I leave the second access road clear no matter what else needs doing. My dad used to sit on that porch at dusk like the whole forest belonged exactly where it was. I can't do that. I finish what I need to finish and keep one eye on the tree line like I'm waiting for a machine to come through where no machine should fit. What stays with me isn't just that somebody came looking along the exact path I used from that box back to the cabin. It's that investigators later connected those coordinate notes to other counties, and nobody ever gave an answer for what kind of thing gets buried in metal boxes in winter, then hunted for so hard that men on snowmobiles will follow a stranger's tracks right to his father's door. The last story is the one that still feels unfinished. I was locked in the bathroom with my phone on the floor so the screen light wouldn't show. Under the door, whispering to a dispatcher and trying not to breathe too loudly while somebody walked slowly through the cabin, calling my name like we knew each other, not shouting it, not guessing, saying it calmly, almost friendly, room by room. I could hear where he was by the sound of the floor. The place had heated hardwood through most of the main level, and it made these softer, flatter creaks than old cabins do. I had learned that the first day because I was documenting the whole trip for my blog, and one of the stupid little details I wrote down was that the cabin somehow managed to feel rustic and expensive at the same time. Exposed beams, stone fireplace, matte black fixtures, all of it very quiet luxury, in a way I would have rolled my eyes at if I hadn't secretly liked it. From the bathroom floor, none of that felt luxurious. I could hear him in the living room first, then the kitchen. A drawer sliding open. Something was set down on the counter. Then his voice again, closer this time. He said my name, and then he said, "You can stop hiding. I just want to talk." My mouth tasted like metal. The dispatcher kept asking if I could see him, if I knew if he was armed, and if there was another exit. I was whispering so softly that my throat hurt. The only window in that bathroom was a narrow frosted one over the tub, and it didn't open more than a crack. The door lock was one of those simple push-button privacy locks, which suddenly felt like a joke. Then he moved down the hall. I could hear his steps pause outside the bedroom, then the office nook, then closer. The thing that made my hand start slipping on the phone wasn't just that he was inside. It was how familiar he sounded with the layout, like he wasn't searching randomly, like he knew what room came next. A few hours earlier, I still thought I was just having a strange trip. I rented that cabin outside Lake Placid for what I kept calling a solo writing retreat, which is the kind of phrase you can only say about yourself if you're in your early 20s and mildly annoying online. I had a personal blog, not huge, but enough of one that I posted regular essays, trip journals, and those neat little productivity updates people pretend not to care about while absolutely caring. I was trying to finish a long piece I'd been dragging around for months, and I wanted a few quiet days, somewhere pretty enough that I could justify the cost as content if the writing went badly. So I booked a luxury winter cabin rental in the Adirondacks. Nice photos, good reviews, fast Wi-Fi, self-check-in, little welcome packet with local recommendations. It looked professional in exactly the way that relaxes you. Somebody had thought through the blankets and the coffee grinder, and the backup candles and the labeled light switches. The first evening was normal enough that if the whole week had stayed like that, I probably would have written one unbearably sincere blog post about learning to be alone with my own thoughts. I got there around late afternoon, unpacked, did the little arrival video clips for my blog drafts, panned over the snowy deck, the mountains in the distance through the bare trees, the stack of books I'd brought but would not finish. I put my laptop on the long dining table because it had the best natural light during the day. I made pasta, lit the gas fireplace even though it wasn't really necessary. The whole place smelled faintly like cedar cleaner and whatever expensive candle scent they use between guests. Outside, there was snow packed on the stone path and a separate maintenance shed down near the drive. Everything about it said managed property, safe property. A place where the weirdest thing you'd deal with was a finicky thermostat. The guest book was on the console table by the entrance. Big linen-bound thing with the rental's name embossed on the front. People had left the usual stuff in it. Beautiful stay, perfect anniversary weekend. Loved the hot tub even in the snow, that kind of thing. I flipped through it while eating because I always do that in rentals. It's nosy but also useful. You can find the real complaints that never make it into public reviews. One entry about halfway through mentioned my hometown. Not directly to me, just a little note. Something like, funny seeing another person from there, make it all the way up here, and then it mentioned my university too. I noticed it because both were mine. And I remember actually smiling at first because it felt like one of those weird small world things. Like maybe some previous guest had been from the same area and happened to go to the same school. It didn't feel impossible. My university wasn't tiny, and people from my hometown end up all over the place. The note wasn't dated super recently. The handwriting was neat, kind of slanted, nothing threatening in it at all. So I kept going. That was mistake number one, if you want to count them. The next morning, I made coffee, opened my laptop, and started outlining the essay I'd gone there to finish. I also opened the private draft section of my blog, where I keep half-written posts and notes. Not public, not scheduled, just drafts. In one of them, I had a line about maybe taking a break later to try this hiking trail I found on a local map. I had not posted that anywhere. I hadn't texted anybody about it. I hadn't even committed to going. Around noon, I got a text from an unknown number. It said, "Trail by the frozen creek is better this time of year. Less crowded, better views." That was all. I stared at it until the screen dimmed. Again, I did the normal thing first, or what I thought was the normal thing. I assumed the wrong number. Maybe someone sent local tips, and the message got misdirected. The timing bothered me, but timing is one of those things your brain can overfeed on if you let it. I texted back, "I think you have the wrong person." No response. For the next hour, I kept trying to figure out how someone could have seen that trail note if it wasn't public. Then I got annoyed at myself for being dramatic and started searching for more boring explanations. Maybe my site had some plugin issue, and drafts were visible. Maybe I had accidentally shared something. Maybe I mentioned the trail in a story or voice memo and forgot. I even logged into the blog backend and checked the privacy settings twice. Everything looked fine. That night at exactly 11 o'clock, there was one knock at the front door. Just one, not pounding, not a doorbell, one firm knock. I was in the kitchen rinsing a mug. I dried my hands, went to the door, and looked through the narrow side window. Nobody there. I opened it fast enough that if someone had just walked away, I should see them on the path. Nothing. Cold air, dark driveway, porch light shining on clean snow. No footprints I could make out except mine from earlier. I stood out there longer than I should have, feeling stupid in slippers, listening to the generator hum from somewhere below the property, then locked up again. I told myself it was wood shifting, some amplified house sound, maybe a branch. I didn't fully believe that, but I wanted to. The next morning, there was a handwritten note on the kitchen counter. "Welcome back." That was it. White cardstock, black ink, placed right beside the fruit bowl, like part of the staging. I just stood there in my socks staring at it. Because that's the moment the whole feel of the place changed. The cabin wasn't just a rental anymore. It was my space for those few days. I'd learned where the mugs were, which cabinet had the good blanket, and how far the bathroom faucet had to turn before the hot water caught. That note didn't feel like a mystery. It felt like a hand on something that was supposed to be mine for the week. I checked every door and window. Locked. No sign of forced entry. Nothing missing that I could tell. My laptop was where I left it. My bag, coat, boots, and camera are all there. The note could have been from housekeeping, if housekeeping had ignored basic reality and decided to enter occupied rentals without saying anything. I actually messaged the property manager through the app and asked if anyone had been on site. They replied an hour later. No scheduled maintenance. No staff entry. That was the first time I considered leaving. What stopped me is embarrassing. Part money, part ego. part the very modern disease of wanting a weird story to make sense before you retreat from it. I moved some furniture around in my head and told myself if someone had gotten in once, I'd catch how. I started taking photos of where I left things. I kept the note. I checked the guest book again and tried to see if the handwriting matched. Maybe, maybe not. That night at exactly 11 o'clock, there was one knock again. I was ready for it this time. Sitting on the couch, lights low, phone in hand, like I was going to win something by being quicker. The knock came and I was at the door in seconds. Nothing, no one on the porch. No one on the path. No vehicle is moving on the road below. But this time I did notice something. The porch rail had a little dusting of fresh snow on it that had been brushed away in one spot, like someone had rested a gloved hand there for balance. I barely slept after that. The cabin kept making its polished little sounds around me, vents ticking, fridge humming, ice maker dropping cubes into a bin nobody needed. Every sound felt too domestic for how alert I was. By morning, I had convinced myself I would stay one more day, document everything, and if it happened again, I would leave. That afternoon, I decided to go for a short walk just to get out of my own head, not the trail from the text. Just the property road and a small loop I could see on the rental map. I brought my phone, pocket notebook, and one of those knit beanies that always make my hair look worse than it already does. It was cold enough that the air hurt my teeth a little when I inhaled too fast. Pretty though. Bright winter sun, blue shadows on the snow, distant sound of somebody chopping wood from another property I couldn't see. When I got back, I stopped halfway up the path. Fresh boot prints were leading from the side of the cabin to the maintenance access door tucked near the mudroom. Then, from that door into the cabin, none leading away. I stared at them long enough that my eyes started watering from the cold. The prints were clean, deep, and recent. Not mine. Larger tread, different pattern. I walked around the whole visible perimeter because I needed to prove myself wrong. There had to be exits. There had to be a line back out. There wasn't. The maintenance door was closed. I went inside through the front, and every part of me was suddenly listening. Not looking first, listening. The place smelled the same except for one thing I couldn't place right away. Something colder, like wet wool or damp gloves melting by a heater. I checked the main rooms, empty. Upstairs loft, empty bedroom, empty. I left. That's what the sensible version of me would have done. What I actually did was stay because by then late afternoon had become evening, and I started telling myself maybe a maintenance worker had come in, left by the front while I was circling the side, and I just missed the tracks because of blown snow or my angle or because I was panicking. I locked everything again, put a chair under the mudroom handle, even though that door opened outward and the chair wouldn't have done much. I called the property manager and got voicemail. I texted a friend the address and said if I didn't respond later, call me. I tried to act like I was being smart instead of admitting I was scared. At exactly 11 o'clock that night, there was no knock. That was worse. I remember checking the time at 11:07, waiting for it, almost relieved to have something predictable in a messed up situation. Then 11 o'clock came and passed. No sound. I told myself maybe whoever had been messing with me had stopped. Maybe they got what they wanted, whatever that even meant. Maybe the entire thing was some unprofessional local property issue that would be extremely annoying in daylight and not dangerous right now. A little after midnight, I finally showered because I had been putting it off. I brought my phone into the bathroom and set it on the sink. I locked the door out of habit more than strategy. When I came out into the bedroom afterwards, something felt immediately wrong. My laptop on the desk was closed. I had left it open. On top of it was my own notebook, the small blue one from my bag, open to a page where I had jotted 3 possible titles for the essay. Underneath that, in handwriting that wasn't mine, was one sentence. You always rewrite the beginning too many times. I don't remember crossing the hall. I just remember being in the bathroom again and locking the door and dropping to the floor because my legs had gone weird and light. Then the sound of a step outside in the hallway, then another. Then my name spoken gently, like somebody trying not to startle me. The dispatcher on the phone asked if I knew the intruder. I said no, but even as I said it, I wasn't fully sure what that meant anymore, because he started talking in this calm conversational tone, moving through the cabin, saying things that were technically public and somehow still felt stolen. A trip I had posted about the previous spring, a photo caption from my account, a line from an old blog entry I had forgotten writing. Not threats exactly, just proof. Proof that he knew enough about me to make the whole place feel contaminated. At one point, he laughed softly and said, I liked the version before you edited it. That's the sentence that made something cold pass through me in a way I still can't describe well. Because that wasn't social media, that was writing, drafting, process. I whispered that to the dispatcher and heard how insane it sounded even while I said it. Then something hit the bathroom door lightly, not a kick, more like knuckles or fingertips. He said my name again, right on the other side of it now, and asked why I was acting like we were strangers. I don't know how long I stayed there. Minutes only, I think, but it stretched. I could hear him step away, then back. A drawer opening somewhere, the front room floor, the kitchen. Then faintly from outside, another sound. Not from him, vehicle doors, male voices louder now, not an inside voice, a shout from outside the cabin. Then everything changed fast. The person inside moved hard for the back of the house, real running this time, not slow steps, not calm. Something slammed. I heard the maintenance door crash open or shut. I still don't know which. Then somebody outside was yelling again, and then heavier steps on the porch, and then actual knocking, rapid and unmistakably official. I waited until the dispatcher told me more than once that deputies were there. When I opened the bathroom door, my hands were shaking so badly I almost couldn't work the lock. The cabin looked normal in the cruelest possible way. Lamp on, throw the blanket where I left it. My notebook is open on the desk. My wet towel on the bed. Deputies moved through with flashlights, and that clipped, calm tone people use when they are trying not to scare you more than you already are. One of them asked if anyone else should be there. Another asked if I had touched the maintenance door. I hadn't. A neighboring property owner had seen unusual activity and called it in after noticing a vehicle parked behind the cabin for hours where it shouldn't have been. That was what got deputies there when they did. Not my blog, not the property manager, not anything smart I had done. Just somebody nearby seeing something that didn't belong and deciding not to ignore it. They found evidence that someone had entered through the maintenance access door. Marks on the latch. Snow disturbed behind the cabin. Indications that a vehicle had been parked off the service lane and then left in a hurry. But the person was gone. Of course, he was gone. The property manager acted horrified the next day. Deputies were decent. My parents did that thing where they're trying not to say I told you so while very much feeling it. I went home with barely half my stuff organized, and left a pair of socks in the bathroom that I never asked anyone to mail back. For a while, I stopped posting in real time. Then I stopped posting my location at all until after I was home. Then for a while, while I stopped writing publicly, full stop, which felt like letting somebody rent space in my head for free. Months later, after I'd started blogging again in a smaller, more careful way, I posted a new piece, no location, nothing personal beyond the writing itself. It had been live maybe 5 minutes, maybe less. When I checked the analytics out of habit and saw a visit from the same anonymous number pattern that had been tied to those texts from the cabin. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe somebody spoofed it. Maybe there are boring explanations that would make me feel stupid all over again. But I still don't know how a stranger got from my guest book to my drafts to my voice in that bathroom. And I still can't tell whether the reason nothing else has happened is that he stopped or that he just got quieter.